back to the Who Witch Where podcast, where I talk to witches about witch life, hear witch stories, and sometimes discuss a little witchcraft. Let's talk about intuition for a minute. Do you feel like you have it? Do you listen to yours? I'm going to tell you a little story about the universe giving me a lesson on listening to my own intuition. So my husband and I are beginning gardeners. We have a garden and some fruit trees, and I have my altar garden. And I'm reading up on how to help them thrive. And one thing that is really recommended is fish emulsion. It does something good for plants. I don't know what it is, but they grow well. They grow better if they have fish emulsion. So we went out and bought a gallon jug of it. Think about how big a gallon is. I watched Ken put the jug into the hatch trunk area of my car. It's a little hatchback. And he just put it in there without shoring it up with anything. And I thought, that's going to roll around as soon as he turns a corner. And my inner voice said, you should fix that. You should check that. And I thought, well, no, it's sealed. And I really want to get home. I just want to hurry up and get home. I'm not going to check it. I'm not going to find a way to wedge it in there so it doesn't move. The lid is on there, and it's a child lock lid. It'll be fine. It wasn't fine. We headed home, which is about a 35-minute drive. About 2 miles from our house, I started smelling old cheese that had been maybe stuffed into a 3-day-old dead fish that had been stuffed into a dead cow's butthole. I made him drive more carefully the rest of the trip. No sharp turns. Don't jam on the brakes. And when we got to our house and I got out to open the gate, because the passenger opens the gate. So I got out to open the gate and I had him pop the hatch, and I opened it to a lagoon of blackish brown, kind of chunky slurry that reeked. And I was horrified. I was going to have to get a new car. How am I going to sell this car now that it smells like this so I can get a new car? Because I can't drive that car smelling like that. But I looked closer and I realized that the emulsion had been contained almost completely by 2 Sterilite in lids and a bunch of empty feed bags. I don't know why any of that was in the trunk. Ken had put them in there for some reason. I don't know. I don't care, because they were containing the slop. So I yelled at Ken to help me get out. Go get some gloves out of the house, because with my OCD, I have gloves because contamination, etc. So we had gloves on. We managed to lift this weird containment system of crap out of the car. Didn't get it on ourselves or in the car. And I was able to pour it back into the jug. So we didn't even lose that much. We lost maybe like a quarter gallon. And that was on the road, because some of it did slop out a little bit. And I was on cloud 9 for the rest of the day, because my car wasn't ruined. And I got off with a slap on the wrist from the universe, to whom I promised I would listen better from now on. And it actually turned out that about a tablespoon of it did get in the car. It ran down into the spare tire well. So my car reeked of cheesefish cow butt until I got off work yesterday. But that's okay. I was able to... Now I know how to take my spare tire out. I know I now have a... what are those things? A wrench thing that you take the plugs off the wheels. I can't even remember words right now. But you know what I'm saying. I know where things are to change like the jack. I now know where all those things are if I get a flat tire. So that's another lesson. Thanks, universe, for that. I am thankful for this. And I still thank it for the I thank the universe for the lesson, for the small love tap of a little bit of terror that my car was ruined, and then dealing with the smell that is kind of still there. But it'll go away. And the moral of this story is, listen to your intuition, kids, especially if it's masquerading as common sense and says, check the lid and wedge that gallon jug of fish crap somewhere safe. This week I'm talking to Melisa of the Ninth House Shop, a metaphysical shop here in Tucson, Arizona, and how she manifested the store and a great community after being told she needed to do so in a dream. You can visit the Ninth House for online classes, tarot and other divinatory readings, awesome artwork, and other witchy altar goods, things like that at theninthhouseshop.com. And I want to thank Melisa for agreeing to be on the show and talk to me and letting me come into her office. And for having some really... She really made a beautiful community here in Tucson, and it's one of the reasons I was excited to move here when I was house hunting from Colorado. So thank you, Melisa, for all of that. And with that being said, let's get on with the show. So today I'm talking to Melisa of the Ninth House Shop, and it is a local witchy supply store here in Tucson. And so welcome. Thank you for talking to me and letting me see your office and having air conditioning.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I would love to hear about your shop, like how it happened. And I have read a little bit about it, and I really want to hear the story of the dream.
Yeah.
If you want to go over your socials first,
okay,
and contact info, that's cool. We'll go over it again at the end.
Okay.
But I know I want to hear the dream.
Okay, cool. So yeah, real quick, the social is just at the Ninth House Shop on Instagram and Facebook, and TikTok coming, and then theninthhouseshop.com. So yeah, we are a modern metaphysical shop and gathering space in Tucson, and the idea for the Ninth House came as a literal dream in the night. I had been working in a totally different job, and I woke up at like 1 o'clock in the morning with just the fully formed vision of what the Ninth House would be. I woke up and drew a sketch of it out in my journal. I would later go back and realize that was on 11/11. It was at 1 a.m. on November 11th, 2017. And when I had that dream, it was very odd because if you had asked me like one day before if I had any interest in retail or absolutely not. It was not something that was on my radar at all. It was not something I wanted to do. It literally landed in my brain. And then there was a very clear, and this is what you have to do. That was it. There was I really never questioned it from that point on. It was just this is what I'm doing. I had absolutely no idea how to do it. I worked at Walmart when I was 15, and I worked at a natural food store when I was 19. That was the extent of my retail experience. So I had no retail, no business knowledge experience. So I really started out with just literally making lists of everything I didn't know and tackling it one piece at a time and trying to get it open as quickly as possible. So we did move quickly. I started the Instagram by December of that year, and then we had a physical space open in April of 2018. And that was literally coming from I have no idea how to do this at all. So yeah, and we've grown since then. We started out literally in the back of an old mortuary downtown, a very tiny space without heating or cooling, and and have just been steadily working towards what the vision actually was. And now in our third space, if you look at what it is, it's very close to that original vision that I had drew out in the middle of the night. So that's kind of the origin story.
I like the space.
Thank you.
I mean, I like the other one next door, but I like the room this one has. Mm-hmm. And the cactus.
Yes. Yeah, we have saguaro out front here, and they're so pretty.
How are you able to fund this?
Yeah, so I got a $2,500 loan from my best friend, and the rest was put on credit cards.
Yeah.
I did not have access to any kind of traditional funding. We've started very, very small and bootstrapped it. That's the reason that we were in the back of an old mortuary, because it was cheap. We started out with very little inventory and just like very slowly built it.
I feel like that's going to be what I hear from a lot of people.
Yeah.
That
I mean, there's just not...
we did it.
Yeah, there's not funding for small businesses, you know?
Especially of this type.
Right. And that's... Yeah, so I think for most people, unless you do have, you know, money that comes in from somewhere personally, like, you just kind of have to start small and bootstrap it. But I think it's important not to let that stop you, right?
Yeah,
like, starting small is better than not starting at all.
So you said you started the Instagram first?
Yes. Yeah, and that was super important for us. I think I started it on January 1st or like December 31st of 2017. And if you go back and see it, like, you'll see this like very Aries style ambitious statement about like starting this thing. But it was really important, especially because I didn't have funding. I didn't have a lot of things to start building community and start building recognition, so that by the time we actually opened a brick and mortar in April, there were already people excited about it. There were already people who had been following our story, and I had been sharing things all along the way of like when we got the building and when we like started decorating things, and like, so people had been following along the whole time. So yeah, that was a really important piece.
When we started looking in Tucson from Colorado, I was really excited to have found your Instagram because I saw some of the events you were doing. I think it was a full moon gathering or something, and I was so excited to come here and see what you guys did.
I love that.
Me too. I was just really happy that there was a community here. How long do you want to do this? Is this something that you want to do forever?
Yeah, I think this is my forever thing. I had, you know, a totally different career before. That was the wrong fit pretty much from the beginning, but I stuck with it for like almost a decade. But I see this as being kind of an endless challenge with endless opportunities for growth and movement and different directions we can go. And that's what I love. Like, there's no ceiling on anything. We can just keep expanding in a lot of different directions. So yeah, I see a lot of things I would like to do far down the path, but
can you sneak and tell us?
This is it. There's one thing we have just started is we've just started an in-house apothecary brand.
Yes.
Yeah, so we just have the first few products of that coming out, so that's going to be an entire brand of magical apothecary products. Eventually, someday, we would like to have actually like a small organic farm that we grow our own herbs on.
Holy crap.
And eventually like a little
That's
magical
exciting.
kind of retreat center where we can do larger events and have people stay like for a weekend for gatherings.
That's a fantasy.
Yeah, totally. So like, you know, down the road somewhere, but I love that there's just like, you can just keep going.
But my husband and I have lottery dreams. We're like, well, we have to go here because there's water, and then I can have a witch garden, and then I can have people come stay, and we can do things.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the dream, right?
I love that you brought up the apothecary, because I can speak on the apothecary, because I've used the apothecary myself, and I can say that I love the products. I love working with Bash, and I recommend her and her services and your services. People should come here and do that, and you should even contact them on Instagram or through their website.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
I'm really happy with the things that I got.
Awesome. Thank you.
So what do you most want out of the business and or your practice? How does the business and your practice, how do they interlock?
Yeah, I think that they both go together, but they challenge me. I don't know. I guess I'm really a fan of challenge. Which is useful.
You are?
I love challenge.
Oh, I'm horrified.
Oh, I love it. Keeps me going. But yeah, I mean, I think that both my sort of personal mission in life and the ninth house's mission is the same, which is to bring more magic and beauty into the world. That's the mission. And because it's such a, like, wide, overarching mission, you know, everything that we do to bring, you know, magical education, products, exposing people to things, like, all of that is part of it. And beauty as well, which is why, you know, we have a lot of artists, we have a lot of makers, right? And celebrating those things, because often both of those things, magic and beauty, are like, they're seen as not as important in our capitalistic society, right? They're like the afterthoughts. And those are two things that I think really make life worth living. And so, like, let's bring more of that to people, you know? And so, like, that's my personal mission, and that's one of the ways that I'm serving that mission is through what the ninth house does.
Every time my husband comes here with me, we leave with prints or stickers or something from one of the artists here.
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, just in Tucson alone, there's so many talented, amazing artists, and that's true in, like, every city in the world, right? And that just needs to be, like,
and it seems like there's
celebrated.
something new here every time that we get to go and look at and fiddle through and everything. How do you handle self-doubt or imposter syndrome? Do you feel like that affects you?
I think it really has depended on the space that I'm in. When I am in my own little bubble, because I do thrive on challenge, I can just kind of keep myself going. When I have been in more traditional business spaces, that's where I really feel like the outsider, and where I'm suddenly like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And, like, I don't belong here. I don't have a real business. Like, you know, I've had a lot of those thoughts, especially early on, right? Like, or trying to go into those kinds of spaces and, like, do things like get funding or get grants or talk to business coaches. I did try talking to, like, various, like, business coaches, and nobody had any idea what I was talking about. They couldn't understand my vision, you know, and they would try to steer me into, like, traditional ways of doing things. And so I feel like in those spaces particularly, that's where I've really experienced, like, imposter syndrome, like, really hard. And for me, the answer's kind of been staying away from a lot of that and, like, finding other ways to learn things. But that is another direction that I have interest in, is helping other people who maybe have less traditional ideas about things they want to do also be empowered to learn the tools they need to have a business, right? Because there's a lot of business coaches out there.
I've never even heard of a business coach.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of them, and a lot of them focus solely on, like, what's your vision? What's your, you know, but then they don't give you, like, the practical tools to actually get things started. And that's really hard to access. And right now, the only ways to really access that is often through these traditional spaces that are not a fit for a lot of people.
I'm still reeling on the business coach thing. I mean, it seems obvious when I think about it, but I've really never heard of that. So, have you, as a witch, have you always named yourself a witch, or do you have a coming out story?
So, I think that I don't think I had a name for it for a long time.
Me too.
Like, I grew up Catholic, and my mom was, like, very, very devout Catholic, but she was also from the Philippines, and Filipino Catholicism is, like, very mixed with the indigenous religions, right, which were much more mystical. You know, there's still a lot of, like, indigenous pagan influences, even though they've been renamed, right? But so her practicing form of Catholicism was very different than what you might find in a church here, right? And it was witchy. Like, it was real witchy. And she did a lot of really witchy things. She would be horrified if I called her a witch, right? Yeah. But that's pretty much what she was doing. And so I did grow up kind of understanding, I think, energy in those ways. Like ancestor worship. I don't think she would have used those words either, but communicating with ancestors, dream work was something that she really did, even though she again would not have called it that, right? But she was 100% communicating with the dead in her dreams. Astrology was something she was interested in. So, like, growing up, I had ghost stories. She was always telling me ghost stories, right? And, like, I grew up with all kinds of, like, superstitions about ghosts and things. So I think that was always sort of part of my understanding of the world.
That it was magical.
Yeah. Like, I don't think I ever really learned that it wasn't. Like, I think most people, especially in this culture, do. Like, where you're just kind of shut off at a certain age. Mm-hmm. My mom still had enough of this, like, indigenous belief system that she brought over that, like, I didn't really learn that. So I always had that. I don't think I started using the word, like, witch or witchy until, like, much later. Honestly, probably not until, like, maybe 2015, something like that. Before, I would probably describe myself as, like, just kind of woo. Like, I believe in a lot of weird things, but, like, I didn't have a word.
New age.
And I think that there was a lot of, there was a lot of confusion, I think, still around, like, Wiccan versus witch, right? And I knew I wasn't Wiccan, so then I didn't know if I could call myself a witch. And so, it really wasn't until, like, I started the 9th house, and I started reading some more books about it, that I was like, oh yeah, no, I'll own this, I'll claim this, right? And as far as, like, coming out, once you start a metaphysical shop, like, there's no hiding it, Like, in my past career, I was a middle school teacher, and so, like, nobody can know what you're doing after work, right? And then I taught kids yoga for a year after that. So it was a very different public persona. But then you start something like the 9th house, and it's like, here I am. Like, there's no hiding from this anymore.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that with this podcast.
Yeah, like now...
Because I'm actually speaking out.
Yeah, now everybody knows. Yeah, which is
name,
just like...
But not a business name, it's my name.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you've been in the paper and stuff, because that's how I found out about the dream.
Yeah. And I mean, I do feel like I've been pretty lucky in that I haven't had any, like, major backlash from that, so.
Since we are in a pretty heavy Hispanic area, I would think that maybe you might from people who are Catholic.
I haven't experienced.
That's cool.
And also, there's a lot of that same kind of, like, witchiness in, like, Hispanic Catholicism, right? Because it's like the Philippines, it's like the same thing happened. They were colonized by Spain, and Catholicism was laid over the indigenous traditions.
I was Bible Baptist, so I know very little about that stuff.
Yeah.
I can get up at what is the thing called where they stand and yell at you?
Where they stand at a pulpit?
Yeah.
Where they stand and yell at you.
My granddad got up in the pulpit and hollered at us, but yeah, that's about how that went. What do you think what would you say your biggest struggle is? Either with witchcraft or the shop.
Well, I mean, we're just coming out of COVID. We're just coming out of a year of COVID. And that was a major struggle.
Yeah.
The shop was closed for 3 months. And, we have always been primarily brick and mortar. Like, we had an online presence, but it was, like, the online store was very minimal, like, 1 order a month kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, the store's closed for 3 months. And we had to get that.
It's hard.
Going. Yeah. It was
You have to take 5,000 pictures and then edit 5,000 pictures and then write it up.
Yeah. It was a lot. It was a lot. And then, I was doing deliveries all over Tucson.
Oh, yeah.
For like 3 months and doing, yeah. So just, I mean, that was a major struggle. The community aspect of the ninth house was a big part of what we did. We were having gatherings 2 or 3 nights a week in person, and all of a sudden we can't do that anymore, right? And trying to keep people supported in community, because the community that we formed here is authentic and people have really formed friendships, and that was important, and we didn't want that to just suddenly be gone, right? So, like, trying to keep Zoom things
I was really thankful for the classes that you had, the Zoom classes.
Yeah, so that, it's just, there's a lot of moving parts, and just having the brain space to keep it all organized and moving, I think is the hardest thing. And then as far as like my personal practice, it's just balance, because I am an admitted workaholic, and I just work a lot, and by the time I'm done working for the day, I have so little energy and time left. So actually making time for my own practice is the biggest challenge for me.
I relate to that, because I work from home. Every waking moment basically is work.
Yeah.
Speaking of home, what keeps you awake at night?
Okay.
Either good or bad.
Yeah, well,
I know it's easy to think of bad.
I mean,
coming out of COVID.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just really the direction I see us going as a country, and the direction I see us going as a society. I think we're in a really dangerous place.
Yep.
And my background as a history teacher allows me to look at the wider picture and the patterns of history over long periods, and the things that I see happening right now, the directions we're going, honestly, it terrifies me. And I think people have a lot of beliefs that, like, oh, well, certain things can't happen here, these kinds of things will never happen here, right? Just because a lot of times we either were not taught a lot of history, or we don't remember it. But I think we're really in a danger zone in a lot of ways.
People broke into
that scares me.
Freaking Capitol.
Yeah, and there's not even going to be an investigation.
Exactly.
Right? That's just okay. Right?
Make my blood pressure go up.
Yeah.
But I agree with you.
Yeah. And I think that, a lot of it is, there's a lot of willful ignorance out there, but even more problematic is there's a lot of people manipulating that ignorance and manufacturing things and manipulating people, and it's dangerous.
So, is there anything that makes you angry about the witch community?
Honestly, I think that the witch community is better about a lot of things than other spiritual or new age communities, at least on, like, the Instagram and things.
Did you're getting into TikTok?
Or trying.
Oh gosh.
I know. TikTok, one of the things that I don't like about TikTok, and why I'm having somebody younger than me do our TikTok, is that there's, like, so much misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much misinformation, and especially on social media, there's like 30-second attention spans, and they're putting things out there that are just to get people's attention. And it doesn't matter if it's fact-based or not, because nobody's fact-checking influencers on Instagram, right? And so I think that, like, that does make me angry, is that, like, a lot of times people who don't actually know what they're talking about have a lot of followers, and they can share a lot of information very quickly that is either wrong or in some cases dangerous, right? Like, Yeah. And we get people coming in asking for certain things all the time, and I'm like, this is a TikTok trend, right?
Like Moldavite.
Like Moldavite. Oh my gosh, the Moldavite.
The gem show blew up over Moldavite.
Yeah. We don't carry it because of how expensive it is to keep it on stock, but I direct people to somebody else who's trusted in Tucson who does. But yeah, I mean, that is something that I think that, again, it's misinformation in the realm of social media for the sake of, like, instant likes and instant follows.
What is something you wish was discussed more in this community?
I think this goes along with what I was saying about social media, is what I found is there's so much really general, really broad, quote-unquote beginner information, which I think is really good. There should be a lot of welcoming, accessible building block information. But I think that, one, often there's not actually explanations about where these things came from, tools, ideas, things like that. They're just, here, have this, here, use this, without acknowledging the context.
Palo Santo does X, but you're not going to learn about
why.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a lot of, like, picking and choosing from all different cultures. And I think what ends up happening is, one, it's appropriation. But two, I think after a while people realize they're really ungrounded in anything because a foundation wasn't built, right? And so they've got things from a million different places, but they never learned how to actually put it all together in a way that feels like there's any kind of structure that gives them, like, long-term guidance towards anything. And I think there's really a lack of the next step. Like, it's like 90% of the content and books and things out there I feel like are beginner.
Mm-hmm.
And then it skips to, like, way advanced.
Yeah.
Right? And this, like, intermediate level, I feel like is really a big gap. Like, people get past the 10 beginner books that they found, and they're like, what next?
Yeah, that's where I feel like I am, honestly.
Right? Like, what path am I actually on? What do I do from here? Why do I believe what I believe? Like, there's a gap there that I think really needs to be addressed.
By whom?
That's the question, right? And I think because it's really popular right now,
mm-hmm.
like witchcraft is really popular right now, it's easy to write a beginner book. I don't want to say it's easy. Writing a book is hard. I know writers, and I shouldn't say that writing a book is easy. It never is. But it's popular to write a beginner book right now. I think that people who have been in this space longer, who do have more of a body of experience to draw from, could be, like, guiding people further down the path.
I feel weird when people ask me for advice because I still feel like I don't know anything, but they do.
Yeah, because there's always...
So I'm glad I have somebody to refer them to.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, who are the 3 most influential people for you in your craft?
This is such a hard question for me. And I was talking to Biddy, who is one of our shop witches, and she's an astrologer, and she was blaming it on my Aries moon, in that I'm more inspired by, like, if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to try to do it, or, like, I can do it better than this person. So that's how I get inspired.
I'm Aries moon too.
Yeah. So, those are the types of things that generally inspire me, but I did come up with a few.
Oh, yay.
So, Lady Althea, which we can share her information, but she is somebody who is very much working in that intermediate space, and who I've taken classes with, and she gives you the context, and she gives you the groundwork and the foundations, and she's very real, and, like, she has been a big, an important teacher for me in feeling grounded in a practice. And then somebody else who I was thinking of is Chani Nicholas, who is an astrologer, and I've been following her since, like, I don't know, like, years before the idea of the 9th house came, And she was one of the first people who I was like, who was woo, right, in the way astrology is like in the greater world of woo, who I felt like I could follow, right, and get more information. Like, she was one of my, like, she was a gateway. Shawnee is the gateway drug. Yeah. And then the real answer, I think, is honestly the non-embodied spirits that guide me. So, guides, ancestors, I feel like that's truly where I get a lot of guidance and inspiration and pushes towards things.
I'm so envious of people who say that. I feel like I don't really have that. I mean, I have some intuition, like, check the lid on that bottle of fish emulsion, but I don't hear them as well as everyone else seems to. So, something I like to do that I got from Ear Biscuits, which is another podcast that I listen to, is they give out a recommendation at the end of every podcast, but I want you to give me a recommendation.
Okay, cool.
Just anything at all.
Can I give you two?
Sure.
Okay. Two things came to mind. The first thing is the book Astrology for the Soul, which focuses specifically on your North Node. It's like very specific to that. And I found that book to be so difficult that I actually put it down for years, because what it was telling me was like too spot on. It was like triggering, and I was like, that's too much. And I put it aside. And then I picked it up again like a year ago, and it has been transformative in like seeing the directions I'm going and like why I'm fighting the things that I'm fighting, and strongly recommend that book. It will be a bit of an ass kicking, likely. And the other thing that I would recommend that's totally different is Morning Pages. Are you familiar with Morning Pages? Mm-hmm. It comes from the book The Artist's Way, which is like a 12-week program. But one of the things she recommends doing is 3 full notebook pages of journaling every morning.
Gosh.
It's a lot, but what happens is day after day after day, when you're writing 3 full notebook pages of your thoughts, you can't hide from your thoughts anymore, and you start to see the patterns that are showing up and like the limiting beliefs that are showing up, and you start to notice how like, I'm really tired of hearing myself complain about this thing for like the 3rd week in a row, right? And you just see yourself so clearly and so honestly, and that practice has been transformative for me as well.
So it makes me uncomfortable.
It's
thinking about it.
It's hard.
Just thinking about it makes me uncomfortable.
And usually it's like the first 2 pages, you're just talking about like your day and like whatever. You do it in the morning, but you know, it's like this is going on in the world. And then usually by like page 3, suddenly like you've gotten down into those deeper layers and things are coming up that you're like, oh, that's what's really going on here, right? It's like getting through the layers of just thoughts that most of the time we're stuck in is just like our normal everyday thoughts. The noise, yeah. So it gets you down below that layer.
The scary part. The scary layer.
Yeah, and down into the scary parts. Shadow work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost last. Before socials.
Okay.
I would like you to tell me a story that you enjoy telling. It can be about anything. Something that makes you laugh when you tell it.
So, speaking of the way I hear my guides and messengers, just because I hear them doesn't mean I listen to them. And I often don't. I joke that, like, they really have to, like, put up a poster board sign that, like, to get me to understand what they're talking about, right? So, in our first space, we really had a difficult time in the first space. There were a lot of building issues there, space issues there, and I knew I was supposed to move on, but I was scared to move on because I didn't know where I was going. Like, it was they were telling me to leave, but they weren't telling me where to go, and I was like, I can't just close it and then wait, right? So the night before we were going to have our big first anniversary party, we had a literal sewage flood in the space.
I knew you were going to say flood.
And
Didn't know it was going to be sewage.
suddenly, our shop, our gathering space, was literally filled with shit. Like, literal shit on the floor on the eve of our first anniversary. And it was like, okay, I give up. I hear you. Like,
yeah.
you filled the space with shit. I get it. We'll go. And, yeah, that, we had our first anniversary thing. And I pretty much, I spoke to Chrissy Tolley, who I also recommend. She's a psychic here in Tucson. But I decided that we were going to close the space without knowing where we were going. And
Terrifying.
We closed the space in May of that month, May 15th, I believe. And I literally was just waiting for where we were going to be reopening. And I had trust that I would be guided and I would get information at some point, but it was pretty terrifying that, like, we closed the shop indefinitely without knowing where we were moving to next, because the message was very clear that we were supposed to move. It was an excellent decision. Like, I'm so glad that we did that. We did find a space in July, so we were closed for about 2 months, and the second space led to the third, which is right next door. And, and here we are.
This is going to be my favorite part of every one, just to stories.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. So, once again, let's go over your contact info.
Yeah, so the website is just the9thhouseshop.com, and then Instagram is the 9th House Shop. Facebook is the same.
You have an app now.
We do have an app. It is, in true Mercury retrograde fashion, it is partially up and running.
Okay.
Yeah, but it will be. It will be very soon.
Yay.
Yeah. It's mostly just an extension of the website. It's easier to use than the website.
Well, thank you again for talking to me.
Yeah,
and everybody come down and see her.
Yes, please do.
Bye.
And before we go, I'd like to say thank you to my patrons for their support over at patreon.com/cleverkimscurios. Thank you, Dusty, Heather, Maria, Amber J, Amber R.
And everybody come down and see her.
Yes, please do.
Bye.
And before we go, I'd like to say thank you to my patrons for their support over at patreon.com/cleverkimscurios. Thank you, Dusty, Heather, Maria, Amber J, Amber R, Ember Wrights, Casey, Charlie, Desiree, Macy, Sierra, Amanda, Haley, Heidi, Jess, K.O., Madeline, Moss and Monsters, whose name I love, Sarah, Travis, Amanda, Joe, Sarah, and Jade. Thank you very much for your support. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the Who Which Where podcast. You can find me all around the internet on Instagram at Who Which Where Pod, Twitter at WherePod, Facebook at facebook.com/Who Which Where podcast, and at your favorite podcast service. Want to help the podcast grow? Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You just might hear your review read at the end of the next episode. If you'd like to recommend someone for the podcast, like to be on it yourself, or if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, send an email to whowhicwherepod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the moon changes.